For today's edition of Truth to Ponder, it's just you and me.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
And welcome to the Thursday edition of Truth to Ponder. I'm your host, Bob Bierman. We haven't had an opportunity in a while, in the last few days anyway, of just having a program where I share from my thoughts and my heart with you. Things that are on my mind, kind of responding to some of the questions you may have asked in recent days and weeks here on the program. And I feel that every once in a while, it's just put some of this stuff aside. We'll talk about a lot of things today. I've been very blessed to have some guests on the first part of the week. And this week, by the way, as you're listening, I'm pre-recording these a little bit in advance. So if anything seems a little bit dated, please understand why. Because, well, we have company at our house. We're excited, and it's just going to make it very difficult to record every day this week. We're trying to get as many shows done a day or two in advance. So if there's anything that should sound dated, well, please understand. Every day I get up, and the first thing I do after I kind of check some email is I look at the news. Now, I don't just look at one news source. I'm looking at several that I've learned to trust. They give me information that, well, it's logical, it makes sense, it doesn't seem screwy, and it doesn't seem, well, it doesn't sound like NBC, ABC, CBS, MSNBC, or CNN. Now, you're going to say, well, now, wait a minute, Bob, aren't you being a little hard on the media? No, I'm not. I have watched in the last several months more television news conferences than I care to discuss. It's just the nature of what I'm doing in preparing for this show. And I kind of keep an eye on important news conferences. And I'll watch them beginning to end without anybody's comments. It's just the news conference. And I'll talk to my wife for a little bit afterward if she watches with me. And, you know, they're pretty straightforward. Then you watch some of the news reports a little later on. It's like they didn't attend the same conference. They didn't go to the same thing. They're making this stuff up. Because, see, maybe that particular press conference went against what they want you to believe. The mainstream media as we know it today, and I always remind people of this, they are journalistically, intellectually, educationally, spiritually, and morally bankrupt. What once was what was called the fourth estate in this country, the check and balance on government. If you go back 100, 200 years ago, the press of that day, I'm sure that some had an agenda, but it seemed to be more about keeping government honest. They valued honesty, integrity, and accuracy in reporting. Many years ago, when I was in college, studying for communications, I took some courses in journalism. They were available. And back then, we're talking like, we're getting close to 50 years now. Not quite, but we're getting there. Let's just say 47 years. 47 years ago, you'd be given some facts or a scenario, or somebody would give a little speech or description, and then you had to turn around with your notes and write a story based on what you had been told. And you learn real quick how to take accurate notes in your little reporter's notebook. Early on, it's easy when you're not used to trying to take down a lot of information to when you sit down a half hour or so later to try to remember all the details. And you learn how to get accurate notes because the story needs to be accurate. I mean, let's be honest. Who wants lying news? The Soviet Union did. China does. Any despot, tyrannical, dictator-type person always wants to have full control of the news. They want you to know only what they want you to know. There are many things they want to keep secret. Because once you find out the truth, the illusion that they're trying to peddle becomes really hard to swallow. I think over the years, and I can't begin to say exactly how many, I would say probably slightly beginning in the Reagan years more than any other time that I can remember, the news has increasingly become more biased toward one side year in and year out. I've seen it over and over again. I see it play out. Saw it play out on television programs over the years. That political bias begins to creep in to television programs to set a narrative. And if you disagree with the narrative, then there's something wrong with you. As for me, I think there's something terribly wrong with our media. In all the press conferences that I've watched in recent weeks, I'll take a little look at some of the news stories that are out there from the mainstream media, and it's like they went, like I said before, you would believe they went to a different press conference with different people and different things were said. NBC and CBS and ABC are masters at editing. They can edit what you say and make it sound exactly the opposite, and they've done it. They've been caught at it multiple times, many times over. They'll take what somebody says, take a piece of something out of context, and then build an entire story with a completely false, lying narrative. Unfortunately, too many people in this country are not that savvy and honestly not that informed. We have a whole generation of people now that really don't watch much news. Look at the ratings in the United States for the news channels. It's not 300 and some odd million people, my friends. It's not even 200 million people, not even 100 million people. When you look at the number of people that actually consume news, I mean, more than just Yahoo headline nonsense. And if you're getting your news from Yahoo, you are Yahoo, because you're going to be misinformed every time. The network that hires, a group that hires Katie Couric to be their lead correspondent doesn't have a whole lot of credibility. The folks at NBC are the most, non-credible people in the news industry. I watch them over and over again. They throw softball questions to Joe Biden. Ooh, tell us about your new shoes. Oh, how is the weather today? They never ask him a hard question, and they never will. They do not want to ask him a hard question. You want to know why? Because they know full well he cannot answer one without losing his way, saying something wrong, and frankly, getting angry. Let me say that again if you missed it. NBC, ABC, CBS, none of them are going to ever ask him, Joe Biden, a hard question, because they know he is incapable of answering a hard question. Even when he gives a short reading of something, like last week, he can't even read the teleprompter and make sense out of what he's reading. Here's a classic example.
And if we do, and I'm sure we can proclaim the palmist, with the palmist who wrote these following words: "The Lord is my strength and my shield, and with my song I give thanks to him."
Now, some of you that listen to this program, I know, probably heard that last week. It was just before Thanksgiving. I think it was on maybe Tuesday or Wednesday before Thanksgiving that Joe Biden made that statement talking about the palmist. I think he meant the psalmist, the writer of the book of Psalms, King David. It is concerning to me, and it should be to everybody out there listening who lives in the United States. Matter of fact, I don't care where in the world you listen, you need to be concerned about this. The entire election, we talked about this last week. I cannot believe, and I'm about to give you my reasons in a second, I can't believe that the results are the results they claimed in these weeks after the election being even accurate. It doesn't make any sense. Here's a man standing in front of he's not in a big crowded room. He's standing in front of a podium giving his little address for Thanksgiving, and he can't read the teleprompter. That's a little bit concerning. It wasn't a very long message, just a couple of minutes. You think you'd read it a few times before, and if somebody didn't correct what's on the teleprompter, you'd think, at least I would think, yeah, granted, I'm younger than Joe Biden by about a decade, a little over, about a decade. The problem is, if you can't comprehend what you're reading to know there's no such thing as the Book of Palms or the palmist, and unless you're talking about a palm reader, how does that stuff get out there? Now, do you see all the major media getting concerned? This is not an isolated incident. Joe Biden, during the campaign, did a lot of those gaffes, mistakes, and where there's this deer in the headlight look, and he can't answer, or he gets angry. But if you watched NBC, if you watched CBS, if you watched ABC, if you watched MSNBC, CNN, you never saw it. They would never let you see that kind of cognitive, disorder, because it wouldn't help their narrative. See, for the last 4 years, the narrative has been Trump is an illegitimate president. He's not my president. The resistance and the news media in this country have been willing participants in a coup. And they know full well they were participating in a coup. They wanted to get rid of Trump in the world's worst kind of way. Joy Behar embarrassed herself daily. Well, she does it every day. That's normal. But she is so mentally bankrupt, intellectually bankrupt, morally bankrupt, she doesn't even know what a fool she's making of herself in front of millions of viewers.
Oh, breaking news. ABC News' Brian Ross is reporting Michael Flynn promised full cooperation to the Mueller team and is prepared to testify that as a candidate, Donald Trump directed him to make contact with the Russians. Yes! He goes to jail. He goes to jail. He goes to jail. Lock him up. Lock him up.
You could hear all the excitement in her voice. She thought that she had Trump and it was going to be an impeachment. She had these visions of him being walked out of the White House by Bob Mueller and his team for some kind of Russian collusion. And it turned out that it was a totally incorrect story, and she never bothered to vet any of the information out. She just looked at it, read it carefully, jumped to a conclusion, and did what she does at least 2 or 3 times a week. Made a complete idiot of herself in front of millions of people, but she doesn't care. She did that on a Friday, and this is what she had to say on a Monday.
On Friday's show, apparently I was guilty of premature evaluation.
You can hear the disappointment in her voice because it didn't work out the way she had dreamed. And for the past, getting near 4 years, this has been the theme of that television program. It's Get Trump. Trump is not my president. Resistance, resistance, resistance. I was not a fan. I'm just going to share, like I say, today I'm just sharing with you some thoughts in my mind, a few things that I found, and in the next half hour, in the second half hour, I've got other things I really want to share. During the time that Barack Obama was president, when he was elected back in 2008, I was not surprised. I didn't get angry. I didn't burn anything down. I didn't break any windows. I didn't scream or yell at the sky. I did none of it. Was I happy? No. Was I concerned some of the policies that he might implement may not be that great for our nation? You bet. Did I see what I expected to have happen? Yes, I did. I saw the man make a lot of mistakes. I saw him being a puppet of the New World Order. I mean, Barack Obama wants to be one of the elitists in this world. Look at him today. He spent 4 years living in Washington, D.C. as the shadow government after he left power. He cannot let go of power. And he wants his legacy enshrined for eternity. I wasn't even surprised when he was reelected in 2012. And let me tell you why I was not surprised. Number one, and I'm going to share this, this is just a political observation on my part. In 2008 and 2012, the Republicans put up 2 lousy candidates, terrible candidates. These were establishment Republicans in name only. That's what they were. John McCain and Mitt Romney. How in the world? I mean, I didn't even want to vote. I did. But I felt like we can do better than this. I mean, really, we can do better than this, and we didn't. Ever since Ronald Reagan, all I've wanted out of a president of this nation is the following. It's simple stuff. This is just my opinion. You can share it. You can disagree. You can tell me that you don't agree. I believe in a strong national defense, not offense, defense. I want to make sure that our people are safe from those that would try to destroy this nation, try to collapse it from the inside out, or even use some kind of weaponry against us. I believe that a strong defense makes a good offense in its own right, just like any football coach would tell you. If you know you're not going to win, there's a good chance you won't even try the fight. It's a good way to keep peace by strength, and I agree with that. If you look to be weak and vulnerable, well, let's go back to the Second World War. Adolf Hitler thought that Russia was weak and vulnerable. He thought his people were superior, and he launched Operation Barbarossa and headed on into Russia, thinking he'd be in there in no time and have it all conquered before the winter. How many years was he losing on the Eastern Front? And eventually, as all his forces were, stretched too thin between France to the west and Russia to the east, and all the Slavic nations and trying to be in Africa, he ran out of the ability to keep up with his own army. And in time, it all fell apart. It all collapsed. Number one, he would have been better off, if you want to look at it as a military person, to have left to Russia alone until he was more secure in what he had, but he didn't. Evil always overplays its hand. Now, there's something I want you to write down or remember somehow. Evil always overplays its hand. There's a certain amount of pride and arrogance with evil, and evil will inevitably overplay its hand. It always does, always has, and always will be. Even Satan himself overplays his hand because Satan wants to think of himself as a god or God himself. And to feed that ego, mistakes are made because the hand gets overplayed. Now, I want to get back to this election that just went by. I have a hard time, as a rational person, believing the results that I see for a number of reasons. First, I want to start in my state of Florida, where we live most of the year. This is the one kind of exception because of various things that need to be taken care of. We vote in Florida. I pay attention to the votes in my state. We happen to live in a county that is considered a purplish county. It's not red nor it's blue. It is real close. St. Lucie County, Florida is one of the fastest growing counties in the state. Our city is probably the fastest growing city right now. And they're building, houses are going up as fast as they can find a piece of dirt to put a house on. Entire neighborhoods. If we're gone for a couple of months, we come back, there's whole new neighborhoods that get built not far from where we live. It's becoming an attractive place for many families to come. Many people have left Palm Beach County to the south because it is a very blue county, very expensive county. Martin County to the north may be conservative, but it is rather expensive. It's not a big county, and it's rather expensive. So the little extra, 5 or 10 minute drive going north, a lot of folks will end up in St. Lucie County because it costs less to live in St. Lucie County. It's not that bad of a commute. Let me tell you something. One thing in our neighborhood in Port St. Lucie, it's amazing. We don't live that far from the turnpike, and when I'm down in Florida, I have to use it quite a bit when I visit WRMI. It's just the best way to go. You see a tremendous number of Palm Beach County sheriff's cars in St. Lucie County. Why? Because these deputies take their car home. That's the car they're assigned, but they can't afford to live in Palm Beach County. They'd rather live in a lower crime county like St. Lucie. Better schools, too. In 2008 and 2012, St. Lucie County went for Barack Obama. That was their choice. They went for Barack Obama. Now, granted, we've been growing all those years, too, but in 2016, I fully expected that St. Lucie County would probably just tip in favor of Hillary Clinton. That was my feeling. And I was wrong. It just barely tipped for Donald Trump. I look back now, and the signs were there that he would win it. Now, was it a huge victory? No, it was small. Other counties that are more conservative, yeah, bigger, Palm Beach, all those, every county was pretty anticipated, but the handful of what I call purple counties in Florida tipped barely to Trump. The other ones, all as expected. This time, Trump won by an even larger margin. Not huge, but a bit larger. All over Florida, the numbers were consistent as it was 4 years ago. Barack Obama's victory in Florida in 8 and 12 were not that massive, so it was an expected kind of result. Number one, when you look at the candidates the Republicans ran in 08 and 12, they were not exciting. People that I know that generally vote, talked to one person in 2012 that said, I just couldn't bring myself to go to the polls and vote for Romney, so I voted for the Libertarian candidate just because I couldn't stand him. And that's why Barack Obama won. He won by default because the Republicans put up two lousy candidates back-to-back in a row. That's just my opinion. There are a lot of other great people out there that should have been the standard bearer in 8 and 12. So Washington becomes increasingly the swamp, as we know. The bureaucratic class runs more of the day-to-day operation of our lives than we would ever want to admit. And somehow, some way, if you look at the election in 2016, Hillary Clinton barely did any campaigning. And I really believe she thought she was entitled to become the next president. She thought she had it in the bag. her echo chamber called the media of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC. They were her amen choir saying she's going to win. There's no way she can lose. So she didn't even campaign all that much. Whether there were any shenanigans going on in 16, hard to say. I'm sure in a few places, yeah. I think that's been going on for more years than we would care to even want to admit. But the election came out the way it did, and President Trump took office in January of 2017 with a coup already in place built upon lies. It was actually something that was signed off on. Everybody knew this whole thing about Russian collusion that Joy Behar was getting so excited about that it's going to put Trump in jail ended up being nothing but a phony political stunt from the Hillary Clinton campaign. The worst part is Barack Obama knew, Clapper knew, Brennan knew, yeah, McCabe knew, he knew, James Comey knew, they all knew. And what did our Justice Department do about it? Nothing. I have someone I want to get as a guest in several weeks from now. I'm going to try to arrange it. One of the things that really disturbs me is we no longer have a justice system in this country. We just don't have one anymore. It has become what I call a legal system. It is legal, but it's not moral. It is legal, it's not justice. It is legal, and that's the problem. It can also be for sale when it's just a legal system. We have the best justice money can buy when it's nothing more than a legal system. When truth, honesty, integrity are important, when those things are the fundamental important things we need in our country, and you're not getting it, we have a legal system that can run you over like a truck. There are a lot of people that should be in jail that aren't. And I've honestly run across a number that went to jail on a plea bargain because the overwhelming evidence or the created evidence or the emotions running in a community, you can never get a fair trial. And they threaten 25, 30 years of jail, but you can get out for 4 or 5. Yeah, a lot of people have destroyed their lives because of the weight of the state that has unending resources. You get some guy that makes under $30,000, $40,000 a year. How can he afford a $200 an hour attorney? I'm not going to say what state or location it was, but there were two things that happened in that same community. I remember, this is back in the probably early 1990s. I went to a radio station to help out for their election night coverage. And I was there a couple of times. They had a candidates forum, and I went up for that candidates forum. And all the candidates for the various offices in that region came by to give the little spiel on the radio. And this one guy was the county district attorney or solicitor, depending where you live, they have different terms. And he was talking to a buddy of his, and he didn't realize that I could hear what he was saying. He was outside the building, and I'd come outside myself. Back in those days, I had that evil habit of nicotine. They didn't hear me. They didn't know I was there. And he actually said, I don't really care about a guy's innocent or guilt. I just care about my win and loss record. Now, pause on that for a moment. I don't care if the guy is guilty or not. I just care about my win and loss record. Wow. In that same county, I met the guy that headed up the public defender's office. Every time I ever saw him in the daytime, there was alcohol on his breath. Yeah, that's what sometimes passes as our justice system. It's just a legal system. That's something we need to get back in our nation, because if we don't, it could be to our detriment. want to remind you this is the program Truth to Ponder. I'm your host, Bob Bierman. When I get back, I'm going to share a few things that you've shared with me, a couple of news stories that I found that I thought were kind of fascinating. And then I'm going to explain what my parent organization that I call Ancient Word Radio, what it's all about, and what my long-term plans for this program may be, and also for the radio ministry of Ancient Word Radio. So hang in there. We shall return.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman. This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
And welcome back to part 2 of the program, Truth to Ponder. I'm your host, Bob Bierman. We started this program as a weekday program back on the 31st of August of this year. I toyed around for a few months with the thought of doing a daily show. With all that was going on in the world, starting with the pandemic this year, everything in this world seems completely disjointed and out of place. And I wanted to provide you some additional information and news and just maybe another perspective on what you're seeing. I've run into a lot of people that think like I do. We're not crazy. We see the world, and people are trying to tell us in the media, you're not seeing what you're seeing. I want you to think about that for a moment. I think it was a few days before Thanksgiving. My wife and I were looking for something different to watch on television that wasn't the news. I mean, we just needed to get away from it. It can be very depressing if you keep watching and trying to dig in for truth. And we stumbled upon that classic from the 1930s. You remember the movie? The Wizard of Oz. Remember that movie? Starts out in black and white, out there in the farmlands of, the Depression era in Kansas, and the storm hits and Dorothy's head gets hit, and the next thing she knows, she's waking up in a dream and landing in the land of Oz. And she's off to see the Wizard of Oz. And everything turns into beautiful color there in this wonderful place. And then at the end, she's back at her home. There's no place like home. For Dorothy, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion, it was a journey, to say the least. And they finally got there. And it was kind of tough to meet the Wizard of Oz that could grant their wishes. And finally, after doing all the things that they were told to do, they finally come back to see the Wizard of Oz. And the scene that stands out is this one.
Of the great and powerful Oz. I said come back tomorrow.
If you were really great and powerful, you'd keep your promises.
Do you presume to criticize the great Oz? You ungrateful creatures think yourselves lucky that I'm giving you audience tomorrow instead of 20 years from now. Oh. The great Oz has spoken. Oh. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. The great Oz has spoken.
Who are you?
Oh, I am the great and powerful Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, the great and powerful Oz. Now, I want you to think for a moment. This is how the mainstream media treats you. I mean, I'm serious. This is how they treat you. They believe they're all powerful. They're all knowing. They know more than you. People that disagree with them are just, idiots and rubes and uneducated. They're not woke. They're not in, so to speak, with the in crowd. The mainstream media. What bothers me, even in conservative media today, you have people that are getting paid multiplied millions of dollars to be a talking head on a television. I'm always afraid when there's a lot of money involved, because when there's a lot of money involved, integrity could, I'm not saying it is all the time, but your personal integrity could be compromised. That's just my take. That's just my opinion. The news will tell you what you're supposed to think. And when you're looking straight at what the real story is, they're just as impotent to say, how dare you question the great and powerful media? How dare you imply? How dare you even think for yourself? We're here to tell you what to think. This is the issue that I have with so much of today's media. They dig for stories. I can remember early on in the coronavirus pandemic, working in a county back in emergency management, having to deal with a local TV station. And they would go to these press conferences. They would carry things. They would even carry the press conference quite often in our county live. And then they would do a news story on it 2 or 3 hours later, and you would really believe they were watching a different press conference. I don't know what's wrong with journalism schools today, but that degree is not worth the paper it's printed on anymore. If this is what the schools are turning out, but then again, our universities and our colleges, way too many of them have become nothing but indoctrination centers. You have to think a certain way. If you don't think the right way, there's something wrong with you. If you believe there are 2 genders, then you've got a problem. There may be 62 genders. How dare you imply there are only 2 genders? If somebody, like the health director or whatever the job is in Pennsylvania, this is a man that claims he is a woman. If you've never seen the picture of this individual, it is scary. You can tell he's a man. He's got long hair. He's got all the male attributes, but he's dressed and acting or trying to be a woman. And of course, a governor like Governor Wolf in Pennsylvania, another one of those intellectually, morally, and spiritually bankrupt individuals that become the leaders of their state, appoints this person. Because it's the woke thing to do, to appoint a transgendered man who thinks he's a woman. Methinks the man has got a mental illness and should not be the director of health in your state. Also, that same health director had all these mandates of what you had to do, and then he gets his own mother out of a nursing home because he knows the dangers. But he tells you it's no danger for you. How many of these governors, mayors, and others have you seen that have made all these rules during this pandemic? You know, this has been an experience to watch over these months. All these lockdowns, all these you're essential and you're not. You can't go to church because the coronavirus is in your church. And then you get some stupid order that says you can only have 10 people in your church. Okay, 10 people. I know some little tiny missions that are only 10 people meeting in a very tiny room. They could meet. But I also know some large church buildings that seat 200, 500, or 1,000. And yet the rule is still 10 people. It doesn't even make any common sense. But then people in government that are liberal, I hate to put it that way, or let's call it what it is, leftist. I'm not going to insult the term liberal any longer. There are some liberals from way back when that were actually decent people. Hubert Humphrey comes to mind. I may not agree with him politically, but I think he would think today people are crazy. He would. He's a classic liberal. Had a heart of gold. I didn't think he'd make a great president. I never did. But you have these power-hungry little dictators in these states. Gretchen, look at Gretchen there in the state of Michigan. Miss Gretchen Whitmer. Early in the pandemic, in the springtime, you can go to the Walmart, but you can't buy anything in the garden department. In other words, you can't plant food. You can't get seeds to plant your own food because the little dictator woman said you can't buy that stuff. You can go to Home Depot and buy certain things, but you can't buy these things. And I'm thinking, what logic is she working with to have those kind of restrictions? It is a power trip, an evil, maniacal power trip. She and those like her, like Andy Cuomo in New York, they're dangerous people. Telling you what to do. And over we see examples of the rules are made for thee, but not for me. We've seen that over and over again during this pandemic. You know, the mayor of Denver last week, headed out of town for Thanksgiving after telling everybody, stay home, don't travel. Except for me, I can travel. Lori Lightfoot in Chicago, you can't get your hair cut. You can't go to a beauty salon, but I can. Because I'm the mayor, and I have to look pretty on TV. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, got caught not even wearing a mask and going to a beauty salon. She got caught. And then she blames everybody else. Oh, I was set up. No, you weren't. You thought you were above your own rules and laws in your state because you think you're some kind of a queen. Yeah, a Cruella de Vil kind of queen. You brag about your $12 a pint ice cream and your $25,000 refrigerator at a time when you're unwilling and wouldn't do anything for relief for those people that have been laid off their jobs, had their businesses shut down. You didn't care about them. No, you were trying to get rid of Trump. You're trying to take over the Senate. You want to increase the number of people in the House, which is why when I think about the media and this don't look at the man behind the curtain routine, because they know more than you as they're pulling on their dials and switches and buttons and they got the big, screen thing going and they're, we are the almighty media, bow down and listen to us because you are rubes and without us you know nothing. That's what NBC thinks about you. That's what CBS thinks about you. That's what CNN and MSNBC think about you. When somebody makes $2 million a month, and there are those that do, a lot of them on TV, they don't live in the real world you live in. They live in a very, very carefully controlled world. They can afford to live in a gated community away from all the troubles. They can afford to have whatever they want shipped to their home by Amazon because their job is essential. If you're the governor of New York, your job, you're still getting a paycheck, though you're shutting down a business. It doesn't affect you. You want to watch this pandemic go away overnight? Tell every governor, every mayor, every city council person, until this pandemic is over, you're not getting paid. You are now a non-essential employee, at least in terms of your paycheck. Then we'll find out the real truth about this pandemic. Now, you're about to say, Bob, but it is serious. Yes, it is for some. But do the numbers actually stand up to scrutiny? Had a little conversation with a friend of mine, and I've been trying to find on the CDC website, so what's the status of the flu this year? Well, they're acting like they're so overwhelmed by COVID, we're not going to bother to count the flu. Wait a minute, what'd you say? It's just too much trouble to keep track of the flu. I learned something early this year, way back probably around the end of March when some information came out. This is to all the counties and emergency managers and people in your health departments and and your coroners, for that count those that die. They had decided that they were going to stop counting flu deaths effective on the 4th of April because they were just so busy with COVID-19. And then they sent out a bunch of rules about if somebody should die in a hospital or a nursing home or at home or whatever the case may be. It literally stated if they've got a fever or a few of these other symptoms. They had a list of like 20 symptoms. That could be anything from the flu to a heart attack. Or it could be internal bleeding. It could be all kind of stuff. These symptoms would just be duplicated in a lot of things that people could die from and do every year. If they had, 1, 2, or maybe 3 of the symptoms, then assume they died of COVID-19. Did you hear what I said? Then you are to assume that they died of COVID-19. Wow. And here we are again. It is the flu season. And as a friend of mine who deals with nursing homes told me that it seems like nobody at the nursing home this year has the flu, but a few have had COVID. They're living, they go to the hospital or get treated and they're better, but we're calling them COVID cases. And man, we have a lot of asymptomatic COVID cases these days, just a lot more than we ever saw before. I bet you if I went and got tested 2 or 3 times, I come up with at least one positive test somewhere along the way. You would too. Does that mean we actually have it? Well, the guy that created the test made it very clear that this should never be used as a diagnostic. He also talks about how the test works. I explained that this past week on a program, that we amplify this residue of the virus, which is really just an RNA or DNA strand, so we can see it. And it could be junk, but if you multiply it too many times, which I think we are these days, it appears, that's why we have all these asymptomatic cases. Got all these people that have to quarantine at home for 10 or 14 days, whatever your requirement is. And then we're being told that, and those asymptomatic people are spreading this thing. They're going to kill people. Don't celebrate Thanksgiving, or grandma will die. Somebody will die. And then, of course, Governor Cuomo last week got kind of called out. He was, on his schedule, he had it planned for his 89-year-old mother and his daughters and others to come to his house to travel. Remember, travel was not supposed to be happening. So he had to cancel that because he got called out. And knowing Cuomo, he was pretty angry about it. I'm looking at a couple of stories. One is 2 out of Canada. I want to just focus just for a moment on 2 stories that came out of Canada. We talk a lot about the United States, but just it goes to show that it's, the same problems elsewhere. Dr. Bonnie Henry, she's British Columbia's top health official, had a press conference last week, and she said she had no time for people who complain that masks make them sick or limit their freedom. She told that to the Canadian TV news service. British Columbia had implemented a mask mandate in November, first part of the month, with a threat of a $230 fine. Most provinces have already implemented them in public spaces, but British Columbia, where the pandemic was not even severe, held out. Henry's comments came after an incident where a woman was arrested while refusing to wear a mask inside of a store called Value Village. Friends, it's happening. It's happening. The mask mandates, do they really work? There is so many years of science. And you can go on Google right now. Google will send you to a story that says they work. Google has an agenda. They are systematically, I have to use other search engines to find real stories of real research done in the past, 30 years. They're hiding it. They're knocking it down to page 37. The front story. See, that's why Google and Facebook and Twitter get called out. Because they're deciding what you're allowed to see. Oh, no, you can't find out that Hunter Biden was making money from his dad's position in the White House. No, you can't know that. We got to shut that down. This is what aggravates me. The media knows all. They're like Pravda in Russia. They're like the Daily Worker in China. These are state-run news organizations spreading nothing but pure propaganda and nonsense. They have an agenda. There's no voter fraud. Try to look up voter fraud. You're going to get shut down by Twitter and Facebook. Man, you can't even say that. Or you might get suspended for a week or a month. You'll become a non-person. I want to drift away to show how governments function, and it's nice to know that I can honestly say that we're not alone here in the United States. So to my neighbors in the North, I want to share this story that shows that your government can be equally as incompetent as my government. So let us salute to Canada. A Canadian federal agency spent millions of dollars on a company in Kenya to create jobs right before that company started laying people off. Now, this is a program called FinDev. It was launched in 2017 by the Liberal government, kind of like our Democrats here in the United States, to support private sector investment capital in developing countries. And this company had been budgeted, you ready for this, for $300 million Canadian, which is about close to American, in the next 5 years. Their first funding initiative went to a Kenyan company called Copa Solar, which is based out of Nairobi, the nation's capital. The company sells solar-powered appliances. Okay, let me read that again. They sell solar-powered appliances. Now, all this money, they were approved a while back, all this money went to this company. And 2 weeks after they got, their first $12-point-something million, they started laying people off. 150. And commenting on the blunder, a spokesman for FinDev named Amy Minsky said that, well, we had in place an infrastructure so we could review all this in a responsible manner. And they said it went through went all through the full due diligence, presented to the board and passed, but apparently that was never the case. Turned out that FinDev had no board of directors at the time, which was not announced until a month and a half later, nor had it opened its head office yet. It also did not have a chief investment officer at the time the funding was distributed. Wow. At the time of the investment, there were only a few staffers, and the money just got sent off. And so there's money wasted. And okay, it's just $1 million. I can remember. I remember Senator Ernest Hollings, old line Democrat from South Carolina. He's since passed away a number of years ago. And it was back in the 70s. I once heard him say, and he had this kind of Charleston, low country Southern accent. Kind of a little bit, if you remember ever, the rooster on the old TV cartoons, Foghorn Leghorn. Well, you see, you got $1 million here and $1 million there, and $1 billion here and $1 billion there, and before you know it, you're talking some real money. Unfortunately, that's how governments think. They really do. It's just $1 million. It's just taxpayer money. I look at the schools where I come from. They spend $21,000 to $23,000 per student. And they're still doing it in spite of the coronavirus and the fact that most of these too many kids are failing and not getting an education. Money is not the solution in education. This clock on the wall is about to drive me crazy. We're about to run out of time. I think tomorrow I'll spend some time explaining Ancient Word Radio. I just wanted to share just some things on my mind and my heart, from mine to yours. If this program is a blessing, why not write me a letter? You can reach us here at our home in Georgia, 21 Berkshire, Berkshire Lane. Add the number 263 in the big city of Sky Valley, Georgia, zip code 30537. 21 Berkshire Lane, number 263 in Sky Valley, Georgia, 30537. And until the Friday edition of this program and weekend edition, may God richly bless you, is the prayer I have for you today.
This has been Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman. To find out more, visit our website, truth2ponder.com. That's truth2ponder.com. Truth to Ponder, shining the light of truth in a darkening world.